People have had a little over a day now to digest this John Bolton FBI raid. Times Square is packed. I don't know if I can safely call this ghost town NYC anymore. I should call it the future of garbage. Could be the new name. But the John Bolton raid, you know, people have had a day to think about it, contemplate it, watch a lot of news about it, whether you like to watch Fox or, you know, MS Now, if anybody's watching that, CNN, New York Times, whatever it is. I think a lot of people watching Crowdsource the Truth get their news from diverse sources. Here, you got a Tamagotchi robot there. Isn't that thing that was like a pet? I was thinking about that recently, that AI would help that. I guess it's back, Tamagotchi Paradise. Only 45 bucks. They're not a sponsor, I'm not advertising that. Just an interesting sign that caught my attention. It's a real ADD paradise here in Times Square. What have we got going on today? Some Fulong Gong or whatever this is. Fulong Dafa. I don't know what that is. They're standing still, so people are making a video about it. Handing out information. I don't know. I don't know what these people are doing. But I was watching Fox. I don't know if they're stupid over there or if they're deliberately trying to give you bad information. But you know, sometimes it is good because they get interviews with people like J.D. Vance, and I want to hear what he has to say about it. But he said, somebody asked him, oh, J.D. Vance, are they raiding John Bolton to get classified documents? And what he said was, look, I don't want to get ahead of the FBI and talk about what it's all about, but classified documents were part of it. And to me, that means there's something, but classified documents were part of it. And to me, that means there's something more to it, and he's being coy. You know, he's not going to tell you. It's like, listen, news, let them do what they're doing. But I mean, again, reading between the lines, I don't think it had much to at all. I mean, of course, I don't think it's about about have a determining whoever they don't. They think that it's got to be about classified documents because Trump's thing was all about classified documents, and that this is retribution. So first of all, to the dumb part, I like the King Kong suit. It's got to be hot in there. It's a pretty hot day, but when King Kong is hanging out in the shade, you got the pissed off Mickey Mouse, stilt walking Statue of Liberty, out of shape Spider-Man. Everybody's here. But, you know, they're saying, oh, it's retribution. Well, first of all, I agree it is. But they should get a dictionary and look up retribution, because if you commit a crime and then get prosecuted, that is retribution. It's punishment for something that you've done. I think they're conflating it with revenge. They're trying to say that Trump is only doing this because it's revenge, and that is what these lawfare criminals want. I get so disappointed in some of these things. This little girl is too little to be standing that alone in the middle of Times Square. Where is whatever adult is hanging out with this little girl? Oh, it must be this lady. Still, that's too far away for you to have your kid in Times Square. Not safe. Retribution, sure, but that's what you get. When you do a crime, you're supposed to get prosecuted. And so we've heard, it was not Laura Ingraham, it was Megyn Kelly saying, you know, these guys did lawfare to Trump, now they're the victims of lawfare. No, they did lawfare to Trump, and now they're going to get prosecuted. They're going to run face first into the law. that's what we want. That's what we should want. That's what we should get. Times Square is pretty crowded today. So how did I come to this? I don't know if I want to call it a conclusion, but it's certainly a working hypothesis that this raid on John Bolton, I don't even know if it was about classified information. They're saying classified documents. They think that they're going to go in there and they're going to have some documents because that's what they tried to do with Trump, right? They spread out all those documents on the floor. That's a good costume. They spread out all the documents on his bathroom floor and were like, ah, look at all that evidence. He must have done something. It's terrible. And then now we see that they just made all that up. Now, who are these characters? I don't recognize these folks. Is it Gumby? No. It's got to be some cartoon I don't know about. But I don't think they were necessarily after documents, even on Fox. See, the reason why I think it's useful is that even sometimes listening to stupid people or people saying the wrong thing, you can get Hawkins would like this, Operation Mincemeat, the musical. He used to talk about this. The truth is so important, it's got to be protected by a bodyguard of lies. He would comment on that. What was Operation Mincemeat? That was when they floated a dead guy. Yes. In World War II, they put some attack plans in the uniform of a dead guy and then floated him to shore. And they were like, oh, look, we found this dead guy. Here's his identification. Look at these attack plans. But it was false plans. It was a trick. And I think it's regarded as one of the most brilliant military deceptions in history, Operation Mincemeat. I haven't seen that Broadway show. They are also not a nor is Death Becomes Her. But that is based on a pretty funny Robert Zemeckis film that I enjoyed with Bruce Willis was in that. Poor Bruce Willis now, dementia or aphasia or something. But actually a friend of mine, his son owns a restaurant, and he texted me the other day, Robert Zemeckis was in the restaurant. I almost worked with Robert Zemeckis. That's a story I think I've told before. Failure of a Sony executive's TV cost me that gig. He was like, oh, I don't know, the 3D doesn't look that good. And then years later, I ran into the guy, and he was like, oh, Jason, the 3D TV in my office was broken when you came by that day. And I was like, great. I should get together with my ex-wife and call up 2015 when I could have done something with that. But anyway, it's useful to listen to Fox News and people who don't know what they're talking about sometimes, even when they don't know what they're talking about, because they're saying, oh, classified documents. They said, well, so then they bring in the guy in the suit in the studio. This was like Fox and Friends. So like, let's bring someone credible on to actually tell you something. And this guy's like, oh, I'm here in the newsroom wearing a suit, so I must know more than these people. And, sources say that this raid was about classified documents, but John Bolton's attorney previously said, no, there were no classified documents, because they were saying, oh, how could John Bolton have classified documents? Trump is the president, so he had the authority to declassify anything. I mean, again, they're on a very, I guess I shouldn't criticize them. I mean, they don't know what they're doing because they just sit there in that studio speaking in hyperbolic terms, but they're coming at this from the standpoint that this is retribution, which they think means revenge. And it's actually trying to reestablish law and order. Because lawfare criminals do need to go to jail. Or else we're going to have nothing but lawfare. What are you doing? Let's go all the way to the right and that guy follows me. It's like, get the hell away from me, stupid. So the guy comes on and he says, oh, because again, they're reiterating this whole, and look, I haven't gone into these details myself. I do remember something about it, but this again was part of the story that was planted by Ben Wittes, or recounted, I should say, by Ben Wittes. And I think this part is true, that, John Bolton, he wrote a book, we know that, The Room Where It Happened, and I'm pretty sure that he's talking about You know, the rumor it happened is he's talking about the Ukraine phone call, isn't he? Do people know what is that title of the John Bolton book specifically referring to? This is the fantastic world of Portuguese sardines. There's a whole world of sardines in there. I don't know, if you have read that book and you're in the comments, let me know. But the thing is called The Rumor It Happened, and even if the whole book is not about the Ukrainian impeachment, I believe that is Ben Whitty's interest. And so again, they're talking about like, oh, classified documents. You know, John Bolton, he doesn't have the authority to declassify documents, so he's in trouble. It's like, no, look, if he's writing a book and we know it's got to go through this clearance process, that's the jam up that Ben Whitty's was telling us about. And I do believe that part is correct. That Bolton wrote a book and they said, no, man, you got classified information in this book. But that doesn't mean that he's taken documents and he has these like scanning documents and putting them in the book. No, he just knows things that happened that are still classified from when he had a security clearance. And if you write about it, they're like, dude, you can't talk about that. So I don't think he necessarily had any documents at his house. I mean, maybe he did. You know, they're talking about Trump bringing the National Guard to other cities, 19 other states, I think they said, that they should clear up all of these guys. Do we think they're paying taxes? Do we think these are legitimate sales? It's just like dangerous criminals hanging out, selling counterfeit goods for cash, probably using the money to do crime. This is organized crime here. Where is this money going? Where are these products coming from? Those guys should be rolled up and sent home.
No, I was going to under the couch.
Is that Carrot Top? So I don't think he necessarily had classified documents per se. I think he put classified information in the book. And then so the other points that they're sort of bandying about on Fox News is that, you know, the FBI can't just go in there because Donald Trump says go in there. Yeah. This guy's a ventriloquist puppet or something. The FBI can't just go in there because Donald Trump says go raid his house. They have to go to a judge. They did raise some valid points, you know. Here we have a street fair going.
Go fight them out the door!
This crazy person is screaming there. They did raise some valid points in that the FBI would have had to present evidence. So, but again, they rest on their conclusions. They're like, oh, well, they must have evidence that he has classified documents. No, they have evidence that he's doing something illegal, sufficient to get a search warrant. They could be in there searching just to get his computer. Like, for instance, maybe they said, oh, hey, Judge, we think John Bolton was emailing or using Signal or whatever, texting with Ben Whitty's and Shane Harris and Andrew Weissman and Norm Eisen and maybe Alexander Vindman. Remember, the Lawfare Institute paid Alexander Vindman something like $300,000 over the course of 2 years, right after he testified against Trump. Oh, look at this. Is this like a city in a bottle? I kind of like that. Oh no, maybe it's fragrance in the bottle. Dubai Musk. I don't know if that's a smell you're gonna like. But we don't know what they're looking for. They admit that, and then they go on to speculate. Now, admittedly, I'm speculating as well. You might say, well, Jason, you don't know. You're free to say that. These are my opinions, hypotheses formed by looking at evidence in the public domain. Other people might look at that same evidence, come to a totally different conclusion. That's fine. If you enjoy these opinions and hypotheses, I hope you'll sponsor the show on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. You can also follow me on X at JG_CSTT and subscribe over there. And you're going to get access to lots of sponsor exclusive content, including the recent Counter Lawfare report where I go over all the details about how Goodman v. Boozy was resuscitated like Frankenstein. It's alive! It's like put on the table and shocked it with lightning and brought it back to life. It really is quite amazing. We're going to see what's going to happen there. And George and particularly his asshole, mentally ill, wife-swapping, paperclip Nazi brother, they're going to be really worried about this. And they come into this as well. Because again, see, well, back to that whole idea of maybe you don't like my opinions. That's fine. People are free to dislike my opinions, disagree with my opinions. There's lots of people who even have come back years later and say, oh, I realized you were right. So that's fine. It's pretty noisy over here. Let's get away from this part of the street fair. But the point is, I'm not just like, reading an article and deciding what's going on. I've been embedded in this mess for 8.5 years. And I've been thinking really hard about it, not just to make podcasts, but because they've forced me to have to basically fight for my life against them. And I'm not exactly about to be taken out by a bunch of stupid losers like them. So I believe I have realized that the reason why George and his brother have been after me for 8.5 years is because George's brother appears to be a litigation mercenary. And I always look at these things sort of as analogies for what I know. My life in the movie business when I was running 21st Century 3D, one of the last jobs we did was a ride film called Daydreams of Dubai. And I was actually pretty famous for 3D cinematography, back in the 2010s. I invented a lot of cameras and technology, and there were international books written about some of that stuff. Anyway, this producer from Dubai contacted me and said, we're going to make this 3D movie, put together a crew, and come out here and do it. So I was the director of the thing. But I had to hire a Steadicam operator and a drone operator and all kinds of, different people to fill different roles. So it's almost like if Ben Whitties was the producer and he said, hey, we need a bunch of idiots to carry out our idiotic production. And I think that George's brother, after 30 plus years of messing around in court with stupid litigation, he'd be known in these circles. Unscrupulous, dishonest attorneys who want to carry out bullshit in court might know about somebody like him in the same way that a 3D movie producer might find out about Jason Goodman in 21st Century 3D. And then I go and hire all these other people who maybe that person never heard of. So George's brother would bring in George, and they have these different techniques, right? And now, by the way, whether you're from New York, Los Angeles, or Sharjah, which is a suburb of Dubai, there's certain things in the movie business that are the same all over the place. And we were able to hire certain guys locally. Something happened, we needed another camera. We brought in a guy from Sharjah who had a red camera, little auxiliary unit, So what I'm getting at is, those guys are a component of Lawfare. And Lawfare, the Lawfare Institute, that's Ben Whitty's thing. He's telling you it's Lawfare. Okay? So I'm looking at the reaction from all these idiots to the John Bolton raid, and they're even like way more upset about it than John Bolton, which I think tells us a lot. Now yesterday, if people saw, there was an article out right away in USA Today because Ben Whitties was the very first guy on the ground. And even today, Fox was like, oh, George Conway was there. Everybody thinks George Conway was the first. This was super responsible of Fox. Actually, wait, here's Fox right here. I was watching Fox and Friends this morning, and they were like, oh, maybe George Conway is his neighbor. It's like, maybe? I mean, do you have a cell phone? Can you look into that before you say something like that and start spreading stupid information? I don't think that's what it is. Maybe George Conway is his neighbor. He probably lives somewhat near there. I mean, he didn't get on a plane and fly there and arrive within an hour or two of the raid, but if they looked around at all, they would have seen that Ben Wittes was the first guy there. According to Ben Wittes, and it's live, he's on camera, he's like, there are the police cars. There appears to be an FBI raid happening at John Bolton's house, or I believe it's John Bolton's house. I don't know John Bolton that well, but nobody else is here. And he's freaking out about the fact that nobody else is there, no other news is there, and he says multiple times that he's uncomfortable leaving the scene. He's like, oh, I got a dog shirt podcast to do, but I don't want to leave here until there's other journalists here. It sounds like he himself wanted to know what the hell was going on, because he's used to, in my opinion, being in the loop on this stuff. They tell him, but I don't want to leave here until there's other. It's like he himself wanted to. He's used to, in my opinion. They tell him, hey, we're the FBI and we're about to do a raid at maybe Roger Stone's house, for instance. And then maybe Ben Wittes goes and calls CNN or whoever, and that's how those guys are there, waiting to get all kinds of embarrassing pictures of Roger Stone being let out of his house in his underwear and his slippers at 6 o'clock in the morning like he's El Chapo. And they are now saying all these things that we've heard other people say, like, oh, why do they have to raid? You know, Roger Stone, love him or hate him, he's never been accused of any kind of violent crime. He's not like he's up there in his house with guns ready to shoot the FBI. And everybody knows he's represented. Was his attorney or whoever was his attorney, they could have called these attorneys and said, hey, we want X, Y, and Z from Roger Stone. Can he surrender to the FBI building? I told people one time, I was away when I was living in LA and going back and forth. I came back and there was an FBI business card stuffed in my door. And they said, you know, call us. It wasn't the FBI, it was the something federal. And I called them and I was like, what's up? And they said, come down to the federal building. And I said, okay. And I went down there and they just started asking me all these questions about all these different business transactions. And I said, look, I mean, none of those are my bank accounts. I mean, this is my name and that is my social security number, but I didn't open any of these bank accounts or whatever. And when they came in, they sat down at the table, put a gun on the table. I was like, what is this? And after talking to me for X number of minutes, they just looked at each other and said, he's telling the truth. And I said, can you tell me what's going on? And they said, it seems like someone has stolen your identity and opened all these bank accounts and steal whatever kind of money. And I was like, wow. So they just let me go. And then later that day, I called them and told them, hey, you know, now this was before I was living in Los Angeles. I must have just been traveling to California for something. But I called them and I told them, like, I had figured out some way that through my NYU ID, I had used this parking garage. And at that time, NYU made your social security number your student ID number. So anybody looking at the registration on the vehicle could have matched up the address with the social security number and steal your identity. And I don't know if the FBI ever did anything with that, but I never heard from them again about that. Anyway, there's a lot of people named Jason Goodman. My point is, when you're not a violent criminal, they have a lot of ways that they can contact you to get information from you. And, like, you know, I wasn't involved in any kind of I wasn't on the FBI's radar as far as I know back at that time. Now I think, between Nina and George's asshole brother and the port of Charleston and all that stuff, obviously they have files that contain my, I wasn't involved in any kind of, I wasn't on the FBI's radar as far as I know back at the last 8 years, I would think. But I digress. Let's go back to John Bolton and all these Lawfare criminals. What is going on here today? Oh, maybe those gang. So anyway, Fox News, they just didn't seem to know what the hell they were talking about. Then, oh, it's saying poor connection. Has everybody still got me here? Lots of weirdos. Yeah, well, hey, it's Saturday in New York. That's what you get. Lawfare. Yeah. Yeah, no, good comment. But anyway, what I was going to say is, I was sent, John Cullen had tweeted at me this from the Atlantic, and it says, and that's by Shane. Now, I mean, isn't that interesting? People remember how Shane Harris plays into all of this. He is the guy who contacted Charles on the phone the very first day I met Charles. So this is what I was talking about with the Dubai production and that analogy, right? If Shane Harris is an actor, this didn't happen in Dubai, but let's say the Dubai production wanted, name an actor that you know, in the thing, some famous actor would be Seth Rogen. We did a shoot with one time. Everybody knows Seth Rogen. I had guys on the crew who nobody ever heard of, but Seth Rogen was there. So let's say Shane Harris, he's the actor in this play, in this production. And Ben Witties hires George's brother to basically, direct the thing. And he brings in his idiot brother George to interact with me. You get it. There's an analogy there where Shane Harris, he's after Charles. Charles is an unwitting participant in this production. They're trying to nail Charles. Remember, the purpose of all of this was they wanted, oh yeah, I cleared up an important part of this with Charles on the phone yesterday, because I don't think I necessarily have emails or text messages from this time, but definitely George set up the meeting with Charles. I remember that. Charles was telling me that he had come into contact, George contacted him like around April or May of 2017. And that tracks. That's exactly when I started interacting with George, April or May of 2017. George and I started doing shows, and pretty much right away, George brought in that idiot Trish. Remember, it was June 13th that we had the Port of Charleston incident, and George had already crashed at my place for a week or two or more, and then left. Remember, we almost had this big. Well, we did have a big fight. I almost said, forget it, I'm not working with this guy anymore, when he left to go see Robert David Steele, because originally we were both supposed to go to Washington, D.C. We had been working together for several weeks already, and he was crashing on my couch. And our plan was, okay, we're going to go to Washington, D.C. George had a rental car. I didn't have a car at this time. George had a rental car, but it's very expensive to park in Manhattan, so he had parked it up by his son's apartment, I guess in the Harlem or the Boogie Down Bronx, wherever his son was living. And he said, okay, I'm going to go get the car from the parking lot. It's going to take about 45 minutes or an hour to get up there, and then about an hour or so to come back. And I mean, I'm waiting around 2-3 hours. I'm like, where the hell is the guy? I call him and he's like, I decided to go by myself because my viewers don't like you. I was like, what, you asshole? I got the whole place packed up, all the equipment. We're supposed to do this trip, and you just change your mind and don't tell me because a bunch of anonymous strangers on the internet have come to some decision? I was so pissed off. But I said, no, you know what? Instead of getting pissed off and destroying a relationship, I was just getting started with Crowdsource the Truth, and I figured that'll make us both look bad. Let me forgive him and we'll carry on. And then the Port of Charleston happened. So my point is, this notion that George was in touch with Charles in April or May is very important, because Peter Smith didn't die until, I think, May 14th. So this tracks with my, granted, this has been a hunch for a long time, but as more evidence fills in the holes, this becomes a hypothesis that is additionally supported by evidence. So George is in touch with Charles in April and May, and I think what's going on is the Lawfare people are trying to get these fake 33,000 emails attributed to Hillary Clinton, allegedly hacked by the Russians, to Charles. Their plan, I allege, was to say, oh, Russia hacked, and Charles was the intermediary, and here, Charles has the hacked emails. You know, they were talking to WikiLeaks and everything. Here's an email Charles sent to Corsi and to Roger Stone telling them to go talk to Julian Assange. They plan to use that as evidence to string up Charles. I think it's weak evidence, but this was their plan. Like I said, they're stupid. When did he die? Peter Smith. I think it was May 14th, 2017. Yes, May 14th, 2017 in a hotel in Rochester, Minnesota. So end of April, beginning of May, George is like, oh, hey, Charles, we want to interview you. And their plan, obviously, was to have Shane Harris say, oh, what's going on? And, start writing articles about Charles and just push this story about Charles having these emails, and then get the FBI to interview Charles. Say, oh, look, the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal is saying that Charles is raising money for this effort to pay Russian hackers to get emails. Go interview him, FBI, at the Roosevelt Hotel. Where are we right now? Oh, that would have been good if I could have timed this to land right in front of the Roosevelt Hotel at the moment that I'm talking about it, but we can't do that. I'm in Bryant Park. Not that far from the Roosevelt Hotel, but also not that close. So, the other thing Charles reminded me of, and he said, this is interesting, he was initially pissed off at me because we were supposed to meet Charles sooner. I should go back and check the exact dates of this. I remember it, but I don't remember the exact dates. He said we were supposed to meet him for an interview sooner, and then I called him to reschedule the interview because, remember, I went to England with Trish to try to find Eric Braverman. And Charles, years later, said to me that really pissed him off because Charles is super organized and he doesn't like canceling meetings and rescheduling meetings and doing things at the last minute. But he also decided not to get pissed off and just let it slide. That was lucky, I think. Hey, look at that. This fountain commemorates something. Strong and beautiful character of Josephine Shaw Lowell, wife for 1 year of patriot soldier, widow at 21. Wow, servant of New York State and City and their public charities. Sincere, candid, courageous, and tender, bringing help and hope to the fainting and inspiring others to consecrated labors. That's what the fountain is doing. So anyway, all of this evidence points to a Lawfare-inspired plan to get these stupid Peter Smith emails to Charles. 33,000 emails. And remember, that was, supposedly Peter Smith was doing something with Flynn General Michael Flynn, who always tells us he's been in the military for 33 years. But then Peter Smith kills himself. Charles wouldn't take the emails. Their plan went sideways. So by June 30th, 2017, again, it goes back to my film analogy, you know, if you have Seth Rogen in the movie and then he says, oh, I can't do the last 2 weeks in Dubai because I have to go back to Hollywood for a more important project, see ya. Or if he gets hit by a bus or something, now we got to rewrite the second half of the movie and come up with a different idea because we don't have access to this guy, but we don't want to lose the first part of the movie that he's already in. You know what I'm saying? They were already underway with this plan and something went sideways. They had to improvise, it seems. So I don't know what that part of the plan was, but this was where I started becoming intrigued by Peter Smith and looking into it more. And I went to Rochester and checked out the hotel room, and I got all the evidence about 2 canisters of helium in the hotel room and Peter Smith only buying 1 from Walmart, and found that video about how you could have locked the door from the outside. I mean, I've been investigating this Peter Smith death for years. Nobody else has. And remember, it was very strange to see that Chris Boozy, I found out after the fact, was commenting on Shane Harris's tweets about Peter Smith, like a lot. Which, who the hell knew about or cared about Peter Smith? I mean, I only knew about it because Charles told me about him, because Charles had been working with him. He was introduced to him by Tom Lipscomb, who was like, oh, Charles, you're investigating the Clinton Foundation, talk to this guy. So again, these are plants that they sent to Charles, just like George was a plant they sent to me. And now George's asshole brother realizes that I am unraveling their scheme and they're in more legal jeopardy than they ever have been before. So that's why they've been suing me for 8 years. Not because George and his brother don't like my YouTube show or are pissed off that, you know, Patreon money from 3 months of when I wasn't even monetized on Patreon. That's the kind of crap George says it's about. That's completely false. So Shane Harris wrote that article this morning. People should read that. You can get it on Yahoo News. Just Google that headline on Yahoo News. I read it, and it reads like a guy who is afraid of this investigation. He's saying, ooh, this certainly, you know, seems like a warning. It's like, well, I mean, you might take it as a warning, but I think that is a tell that you know you're guilty and that they're coming after you. Perhaps Shane Harris knows what was being discussed with John Bolton, and just like all these idiots were sent to Charles to try to jam him up, I think Bolton was sent to Trump to try to jam him up. And the room where it happened, you know, this is all about starting and perpetuating the war in Ukraine, where they're laundering billions and billions of dollars. Remember, it was the Lawfare Institute that paid Vindman. So, I mean, in many ways, Ben Wittes is kind of at the nexus of all this Ukraine war stuff. His wife was the chief of staff or the deputy chief of staff for the ambassador of weapons or something like that, Tamara Wittes. Now she's the head of the National Endowment for Democracy. Right? That thing was hooked up with Nina Jankowicz and Bill Browder. Lots of bad people. So the other thing that was really interesting to me is I could not for the longest time understand how the stupid bankrupt loser, Chris Boozy, would be represented by a white shoe law firm with over 700 attorneys, $450 million in annual revenue, 18 offices around the country and around the world. How does a loser like Boozy, how does a boozy loser get a big-time law firm like that to represent him? Boozy is like one notch above this genius. You know, Boozy might rent space from that guy. I don't think he could get Ballard Spahr to show up. But one interesting thing that I've known about for a long time, but it's just clicking in my mind right now. Ballard Spahr, the attorney representing Boozy, is this guy Maxwell Mishkin. He's a defendant now as well. I sued him too because I knew he was involved in this, but I didn't quite have the details solidified in my mind in the way that I believe I do now. But Mishkin, he also was involved in the United States versus Sussman. That was that case that John Durham brought against Hillary Clinton's campaign attorney, Michael Sussman, for going to the FBI and speaking to the FBI General Counsel, Jim Baker, and saying, hey, you know, I just want to help out the Bureau. He was charged with lying. Now, it's true he was acquitted, but it's very difficult to know exactly what was going on in that case because so much of it has been put under seal. But I started saying to myself, wait a minute. So Mishkin was representing a guy named Eric Lichtblau in that case. And Lichtblau was not a defendant. Lichtblau was a journalist and kind of like a fact witness because he had been involved in kind of, you know, he was a conduit of some sort for information, you know, like we see our idiot friend Ben Wittes sends emails to James Comey saying, hey, look at this. Shane Harris at the Wall Street Journal is investigating all this Russian hacking stuff. The demonstrative pedagogical summary, a document from a British intelligence firm that contains Charles's name that Shane Harris would later call Charles to ask him about. I don't know if this is true, James Comey, but you better investigate it. It's going to be in the news. Then it comes out in the news, and you know Rybecki is on this email. Also, Jim Baker is on this email. Our same buddy over there who is involved in the United States versus Sussman. Could be a coincidence, but I think it's a little bit more than mere coincidence. I think we're looking at the crew. In other words, you could look at the crew from Daydreams of Dubai and the crew from Julia X, and you know, Kevin Sorbo wasn't with us in Dubai, but a lot of the same people. Wait a minute. Hey, who's that electrician? Who's this Steadicam operator? Who's the digital imaging technician? Wait a minute. I know these guys. They work together. They're doing the same productions together. So do you see what I'm saying? All these guys, all of these Lawfare shitheads are working together on the same kind of productions. I allege. This stuff hasn't been proven in court yet. So anyway, in that USA v. Sussman, Lichtblau, he's trying to keep certain, there's a Maserati, he's trying to keep certain sources under seal. He wants to seal documents. So that's why he's represented by Maxwell Mishkin in that litigation.
Commonality.
We're on 36th Street, but I can never remember where the Walcott Hotel is. It might be back that way. Mishkin, he files all these motions to keep Eric Lichtblau's sources under seal. And it occurred to me today, wait a minute. Is it Benjamin Wittes who's the source to Lichtblau? Because that would make a lot of sense, right? And then I was like, well, did Benjamin Wittes write about that USA v. Sussman? And sure enough, look at that, he did. On the special counsel's weird prosecution, look at that, 1221, that's a 33. Weird prosecution of Michael Sussman. So this article goes on and on about how stupid the prosecution is and how it shouldn't be done and that this is just Trump trying to prosecute his, political enemies and Lawfare Russe. He's trying to make it seem ridiculous and stupid, and this a little bit, methinks thou doth protest too much, is what I'm thinking about that. He just goes on and on and on about why he's skeptical about it. Merci, no coup. No coup. He's involved in the coup. but he wants you to think, no, there's no coup there. So I was like, well, that's interesting. Seems like Ben, no, they're there, pay no attention to that prosecution. It's weird, right? And then he wrote another article about it after Sussman was acquitted. He wrote a second article about it here, where his thoughts on the Michael Sussman verdict. And now finally here, when he's in the clear, now this is published at 11:34. Maybe he missed 11:33 by 1 minute, uploaded it late. And that would have been another encoded 33. But in here, he reveals to us, full transparency, now that I'm no longer in legal jeopardy and all of my stuff is under seal, some of my text messages with FBI General Counsel James Baker, who, by the way, is disclosure, Baker is a personal friend and former colleague at Brookings Institute and Lawfare, and some of his text messages to me were entered as evidence in the case. Oh, but wait, you can't click on the link anymore. What happened to that evidence? I would like to read those text messages, Ben Wittes. And before you start going to archive.org, I did that. You can't get them. I think that might be the material they were trying to put under seal. They succeeded. It's sealed. You can't get it. Isn't that crazy? So I think this raid on John Bolton's house is about rolling up the Russiagate criminals, the Lawfare network. I don't think it'll reach as far from a criminal standpoint as George and his asshole brother, but that's fine. I guess Comic-Con must be happening or something.
It wasn't expensive, but yeah.
It's people in costumes. But what do people think about that? I mean, this is like an 8.5-year long investigation. Some of this evidence is, that's 3 years ago that case happened. And you know what? When I said to John Durham at that hearing where Ivan Raiklin was there, and Raiklin was there, he's looking after General Flynn's interests. That's where I met Ivan Raiklin and tried to hire him to become my attorney for that case where Nina Jankowicz is trying to jam me up. Isn't that weird? Nina Jankowicz and Ben Wittes are represented by the same attorney in Goodman v. Boozy, not Mishkin, somebody else. I mean, I think this is what's happening. Again, I need to stress, these are allegations. George's brother will certainly be transcribing this video and filing it with the court. Go ahead. I don't mind. But these are allegations, statements of pure opinion, my conjecture based on public domain evidence that these people put into the public domain. You might look at that evidence and come to a different conclusion. You're free to do that. But if you find what I talk about interesting, entertaining, informative, educational, please sponsor the show. These people have been trying for 8.5 years to destroy my livelihood, and they've been more effective than I like to admit. I really need your sponsorship and support by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. You can make a one-time sponsorship payment of any amount on paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. If you used to sponsor on Odyssey, you got to do that with cryptocurrency now. And if you're still on there, that means you were getting the show for free for 3 months. So thanks to all the people who have made up for lost time with the one-time sponsorship payments on paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. You can also sponsor if you're following me on X at JG_CSTT by subscribing there. So again, that's what I think is happening. We know that Ben Wittes is in the practice of emailing people at the FBI. Obviously, if he's saying he's got the this document that he got from Shane Harris. He's going to have emails with Shane Harris. So doesn't it stand to reason that if he's got text messages with Jim Baker that were evidence in the case, those are gone. He would probably not want to see text messages. Maybe it never even went into evidence. Yeah, that makes more sense. So we've seen, he's admitting that the text messages between him and Jim Baker weren't evidence in that case, but it certainly would be very damning if then corresponding text messages with Eric Lichtblau showed up. That made, like, in other words, we see this communication. Yeah, see, we see this communication with James Comey, and that's evidence that we got from the Senate Homeland Security and Government Accountability Committee. And I always say, you know, certainly James Comey, he might be a jackass. He's definitely a jackass, but he's a sophisticated lawyer, a sophisticated prosecutor, lots of experience in court and handling evidence. I just don't think we would see that email in evidence unless they wanted people to see it. I think the part of it that they don't want you to see is the Ben Wittes communications with Shane Harris leading up to that, saying, okay, we got to get these emails to Charles Ortel. I'll go email Comey and tell him to communicate with you. So do we have similar communications with Eric Lichtblau? The court has seen these Ben Wittes communications with Jim Baker, the relevant communications in U.S. v. Sussman, but we can't see them anymore. And obviously Sussman got off. Maybe Sussman got off because if we could have seen those communications, those alleged communications between Ben Wittes and Eric Lichtblau, they would have said, wait a minute, this is a broad conspiracy to plant fake information and get the FBI investigating leads that don't actually exist, to open up investigations into people. See, that's the other important thing that occurred to me from reading those articles. Ben Wittes is smearing that prosecution. He's like, oh, you know, this whole communication about Alpha Bank, that's what was going on there, is that Lichtblau was writing in the New York Times about how Alpha Bank had a server that was allegedly pinging somebody at the Trump Tower, and Donald Trump was somehow in communication with the Russians through this thing. Alpha Bank denied it, and it was proven to be completely fake. So Ben Wittes is saying, oh, that's a fake story. Total nonsense. Pay no attention to that. Would they have done the same thing with the emails had they been transmitted? Uh-oh. Wait, we've lost. Is it back? Now it's back. Would they have done the same thing with the emails and said, oh, this is fake evidence, fake emails, wasn't hacked by the Russians, everything Charles Ortel says about the Clinton Foundation is fake and based on stupid evidence? I do believe that was a component of the plan. They wanted to show that they were trying to hack Hillary Clinton, that they had done things that counted as espionage, but in the end what they got was junk. So in one fell swoop, they would have taken out Trump. And by the way, they were hoping at the time that they were doing it, just like with the Alpha Bank thing, didn't matter if it was true or false. They just wanted to put it out into the public, which the New York Times succeeded in doing, so that the public would think, oh, this guy has a server communicating with Russia, I'm not going to vote for him. That doesn't have to be adjudicated in court. That's just a nasty smear that they want to have a negative effect on the election. See, that's Ben Wittes' style. He doesn't want to talk about anything when he's got potential legal jeopardy. He waits to see how things play out. And then when he sees, okay, Joe Biden is going to be president December 2020, now, see, that guy doesn't want to be seen. Why is he walking? What's that fucking guy's problem? You're a fucking moron, dude. He doesn't want to talk about Peter Smith when he realizes he could be prosecuted. But when he knows they're going to have a disinformation governance board and bot sentinel that can kick me off of every social media platform, then December 2020, then he wants to talk about it. He doesn't want to say anything about the Sussman prosecution until he knows that these documents are under seal, and then he can say, oh, see, that was all silly nonsense. So they're covering their tracks is what they're doing there. It's what it seems like to me. So I don't know, I haven't really heard anybody else talking about this as comprehensively as I am here. You know, Matt Taibbi is still stuck on the Steele dossier. You know, he's far too important. Oh wow, this medical thing is out of business. That's pretty surprising. Everything's going out of business. It's only going to get worse, I'm sure, when Zoran Mamdani shows up. But, you know, screaming homeless lunatics, I don't know, I'm not really too into federalizing the police, but I think they've sort of already done that through the JTTF. So if we're going to do that, I'd rather at least project that enforcement toward actual criminals than me. That's already happening. You know, Valerie Caproni and so far everybody in the U.S. District Court has been facilitating this lawfare, allowing George's stupid brother to get away with nonsense. I have a feeling the winds of change are blowing, and he's not going to be able to do that for very much longer. I certainly have their nonsense figured out, I think, better than I have before. So just wanted to take a little walk and tell everybody about that. What do people think about all this? I think that's what the purpose of the John Bolton FBI raid was. It's the start of the end for the lawfare losers. So Ben Wittes, right, and so on the news, they missed the whole Ben Wittes angle. They were like, oh, George Conway was outside there. No, Ben Wittes said, we need to get journalists out here before I leave, and he likely would have called George Conway. Yeah, no, I know, that guy was a lunatic. Anyway, that's the story for today. I'll be back tomorrow with Charles. We'll talk about this, I'm sure. I got to check when it was that I went to England. They were very upset about that. I don't know. There's so many resources that they have expended in trying to stop me through lawsuits, and you know this has got to reach Adam Sharp as well. That guy is a scumbag, and the whole, you know, kicking Trump off of Twitter, covering up the Hunter Biden laptop story, that falls into Adam Sharp territory. But these people are CIA, or somehow connected to the CIA. You know, Ben Wittes was on Joe Biden's Department of Homeland Security intelligence experts group. Like George's brother, he's pretty stupid for an intelligence expert. It's a sad state for our intelligence community. But you know what? He's right there emailing with Comey, so he does seem to be involved in intelligence. You know, you can't say it's a conspiracy theory. How many people have James Comey's personal email address and send him documents that immediately get forwarded to Andrew McCabe, James Rybecki, and Jim Baker? These are the top guys at the FBI. So, I mean, it's not like, you know, they're making arrangements to go play pool or something. Pretty weird. But I think these guys are in a lot of trouble. Finally. Thank goodness. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Oh yeah, this Bye Bye Baby is becoming the Malin. What is this? It's an event space. A work and event space where the most ambitious go. This was a pretty ambitious gambit from the Lawfare morons. Maybe they'll have some event at this workspace. I don't know. But thanks for watching. Thanks for sponsoring the show, everybody. help keep counter lawfare going. This guy with his mask. And stay safe, everybody. Enjoy the last days of summer. And don't forget to follow on X at JG_CSTT.